There is no uniform to your authenticity. No uniform to conservatism, no uniform to libertarianism, no uniform to being a successful entrepreneur or a thinker. In fact, the people that burn their uniforms, the people that shatter the mold, are the people that become revolutionary.
Welcome to the Thought Leader Revolution with Nikki Ballou. Join the revolution. There's never been a better time in history to speak your truth, find your freedom, and make your fortune. Each week, we interview the world's top thought leaders and learn the secrets of how they built a 6 to 7 figure practice. This episode has been brought to you by eCircleacademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.
Right? Whether it's Elon Musk, Benjamin Franklin.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. I'm your host, Nikki Ballou. And boy, do we have an exciting guest lined up for you today. Today's guest is one of the men credited with helping elevate and uplift the MAHA MAGA movement into the White House. I am speaking, of course, of none other than the one, the only, the legendary AJ Rice. Welcome to the show, AJ.
Nikki B, great to be here, brother. It's about time, right? I was waiting on you, you know? I thought we had a date, and now that I'm here, I'm never leaving. So it's a pleasure. Really an honor to be here.
Brother, it's an honor to have you here. So, AJ, you and I, we've gotten to know each other a little bit, and I'm a huge fan, but the folks that listen to this show, these are society's great heroes. They're the entrepreneurs. They're the men and the women who dare to dream, and through daring to dream, elevate all of humanity. And they listen to this show, not for me, because I'm here every week. They listen to the show because of you. They want to learn from you. They want to apply what they learn into their lives and their businesses. But before they can do that, before they can open themselves to you, they got to get to know you. So tell us your backstory. How'd you get to be the great AJ Rice?
Well, I appreciate that, really. And look, the thing is, you know, anybody that's an entrepreneur or a Renaissance person, it's never really a straight line to get to where you need to, right? You sort of build on successes, but you have to appreciate your failures too. I mean, creative destruction is real. And, you know, without failing, Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team, right?
Sure.
So without failing, there's no upward mobility, for sure. And sometimes, look, especially with the millennials, and I'm a geriatric millennial, I'm an old millennial, I'm like Gandalf the millennial over here. You know, pretty much anyone born from 1980 to now, you know, we're not going to have the legacy benefits and the pensions and the Social Security to sort of rely on. So you have to take control of your own life. That could be creatively, financially, could be finding a wife, romantically with, whoever you wish. So from my perspective, I come from Philadelphia. The audience is going to hear a lot of that in the next few minutes. And, you know, kind of a blue collar background. My parents were sort of the first sort of boomers that went to college in their families. Irish Catholic. And, you know, mostly as far as politically Democrats, Democrat, sort of Irish Catholic, JFK Democrat. And, you know, I was sort of a liberal arts guy. So, as you know, in school, they're the things that, you know, attracted me. So voracious reading, but also history and why, you know, the United States and in particular Western civilization, which includes Canada and England and Australia and many other part of the sort of Anglosphere, why it's special and how did we get here? So I've read everything from, you know, from ancient Greece all the way forward. And I was in Penn State, you know, studying English literature. And look, my background is, you know, I'm a disruptor. I like to mess with people. I don't like to be told what to do. I don't like to be told what to read. But I worked in the, you know, as a sort of a volunteer on some political campaigns in the late 90s through the 2000s. And I was a junior in college when September 11th, 2001 happened. And look, I've got a theater background. I've done some film. I've directed. I've written screenplays. You know, I've dabbled in all of that. And, you know, there was a part of me that thought maybe if once I was done with my bachelor's degree, I would go get maybe a Master of Fine Arts in creative writing or something. But when September 11th happened, it sort of redirected the river. It kind of was one of these things that psychologists like to call flashbulb events. And, you know, we all don't have many of them. You know, the boomers have a lot. You know, where were you when JFK was assassinated, or, you know, when Nixon resigned or whatever. But for me, I mean, I remember the Challenger shuttle exploding when I was 5 years old. I remember the OJ verdict, where I was when that happened. And I remember September 11th. You know, has there been any sense? I mean, we're talking 20 years now. And, you know, although there's been traumatic events like COVID and you know, the financial crisis in '08 and so on, and they affect our culture, they affect our economy. I don't remember where I was at that exact moment, right? It's not one of those, you know, flashbulb Polaroids in your head. And I redirected my life because of Osama bin Laden. Ironically, it's funny. The guy that shot him is a client of mine, Rob O'Neill. Rob O'Neill, the guy, yeah, which is Sweet Revenge. But how did I get there? How did I go from studying Hemingway and Wordsworth and Twain to working with the Navy SEAL that kicked in bin Laden's door? Well, I went into graduate school to try to get a master's instead of in creative writing, but into you know, Middle East studies and political science. I started working on campaigns, and I helped a Republican Congressman, Mike Fitzpatrick, who's no longer with us. He died of cancer, but his brother actually has the seat now, get elected in 2004. And I came to D.C., and, you know, Capitol Hill's tough, man. It's a lot of email checking going on up there, a lot of Starbucks runs on behalf of the American taxpayer. You know, and I saw actually an ad for an internship on the Laura Ingraham radio show. Laura is now famous here in the United States for her TV show. But back then, she was the most listened to female radio host in the United States. We had close to 400 stations. And I went in, and I worked with Ingraham, sat there, and, you know, Ingraham, she's a tough cookie. She was actually going through a breast cancer surgery and treatment when I went in there. And, you know, she was, you know, bald, and she had a little mannequin head. She had, you know, wig. I mean, she's tough. She's tough. And, you know, she came from nothing herself, put herself through Dartmouth. You know, her mother worked in a diner, and, you know, she's from like blue collar Connecticut, Danbury, I believe. So we kind of hit it off, and she basically brought me in as an intern. And within about 4 months, I was her assistant. Then I was her associate producer. Then I was her executive producer. And we built that show up to be a powerhouse. And then I got kind of moved around to start other shows and to work on other shows. So the American radio world here in the United States, whether it's with Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage, Mancow, Howard Stern, or, you know, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, I know all the Glenn Beck. I've either worked with or knew at the time all these guys. I know them all now. Yeah. The ones that are still with us. And, you know, I basically worked as a producer for almost a decade, built up some of the biggest shows in America. And then you know, look, being a producer of some of these shows could be a young man's game. I created a consulting business, which includes public relations, which is what I do now. And I was able to sort of reverse engineer the fact that I went from sort of, you know, taking incoming from people that wanted to put their guests on my shows to now being the person that's sending out people to get on shows. And it's interesting because, you know, a lot of these sort of local hosts around the United States, regional hosts, I know them all, because when you work on a nationally syndicated radio show, you know, Laura's show in particular was carried on hundreds of stations. Most of those stations also had local hosts who I work with now. And, you know, it's a funny thing. It helps to have someone like Ingraham in your corner when you start off. And Monica Crowley, too, Monica Crowley's going to be confirmed any minute here to be Assistant Secretary of State and work with Marco Rubio, here in the United States. So they've kind of, those two in particular, those two women. And look, my mom's a tough cookie. She's a breast cancer doctor. They kind of pulled me from the river like Moses. I mean, they're sort of my surrogate big sisters, surrogate media mothers. I call them Fire and Ice, Monica Crowley and Laura Ingraham. They're different, and they're both tough. One actually worked for Reagan, one worked for Nixon, and they have kind of kept me out of trouble for the last 20, 25 years. I was their producer. They are clients now to some degree. I go on their shows as a guest, which is interesting considering, when Ingram puts me on her Fox News show, I always have to remind her that my job used to be to go get her coffee.
That's
right?
Wild.
I used to have to go get the woman coffee. Right. So, but that's growth in the mailroom, right? Do you think Bob Hope wanted to? No, he started in the mailroom. And every single person watching, whether you're an artist, whether you're a speaker, you're a thought leader, you want to invent something, you want to be an entrepreneur, you all have your mailrooms. We all had a mailroom. It's a metaphor for life. My wife goofs on me because when I was in school, I worked all kinds of odd jobs. I worked at wineries. I used to write jokes for stand-up comics, which if you buy these books, you'll now I'm writing them for myself. But I worked at the Gap. And, this is a male and female clothing retailer, popular, been around since the 60s. And, I would have to fold sweaters and stack them so that they lined up perfectly, like these books behind me, small, medium, large, extra large. And I had to learn how to air fold. So I could pick up so I go shopping now with my wife and walking around the mall, go to the fancy stores, and I see some table where it looks like hell, a tornado hit it. My wife's talking to me, and I'm grabbing sweaters, and I'm air folding sweaters like a Jedi, not even looking, right? So needless to say, here at my house, I think the audience knows who folds the laundry, right? So, look, look, when it comes to the PR world, I went from sort of being in the sort of theater, English literature world to the political world, working on Capitol Hill, becoming a producer, and that sort of morphed into what I do now, which is I run a PR firm, and we actually promote a lot of the people from Trump world, the people from RFK Jr. world. I like to think that we're the center of the MAGA cinematic universe here. I'm like the Kevin Bacon of Trump and RFK Jr. world. It's like 1 degree, 2 degrees separated from AJ Rice.
That's awesome.
But Trump kind of changed the dynamic, brother, in the sense that a lot of the other PR firms here in town, and I'm here in Washington, D.C., they threw in with all the people running against Trump 10 years ago, 9 years ago now. So, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, whoever. Rand Paul, they threw in with them, where we threw in with Trump almost out of the gate. When the OG came down the golden escalator, and we've been with him ever since. And because of that, not just backing the right horse for myself, selfishly about my career or, however much money you think you can make doing this. It's about, saving the country too from me.
It is.
And look,
saving the world, brother, because if freedom was extinguished in the United States, it would be extinguished everywhere within a decade.
Sure.
Don't kid yourself.
Sure. Right. And, while going through this, I had the opportunity in this weird way, because I had worked on Trump's behalf through the first term and after the 2020 election. People write books about Trump. We promoted them. Some people that worked in the administration, like Peter Navarro. I actually do work with Donald Trump Jr. I was the publicist for both of his books. And I've actually been on his show, his podcast recently, promoting my own.
Nice.
And, it's a weird thing that happened in 2023 because I was working with Donald Trump Jr.'s publishing house, which is called Winning Team Publishing, and they do Judge Jeanine Pirro's books and Charlie Kirk and MTG and many others. But I got approached by the RFK Jr. world. And I never thought in a million years, being pretty much a Republican my whole life, but coming from parents that came out of the Irish Catholic Kennedy Democrat Party, which, sadly to say, does not seem to really exist anymore. If they do, they get thrown out of the family, like our current HHS secretary. But I had the opportunity to work with his super PAC and to work on his Dr. Fauci book. The head of his super PAC is the head of Skyhorse Publishing, Tony Lyons, who's a friend of mine. We do a lot of their books. So it's this weird thing that happened career-wise, where I have all these MAGA people, and I'm doing all these doctors, Robert Malone, Naomi Wolf, Pierre Corey, all of them, Edward Dow. I'm doing all these guys, and I'm doing all the Trump people. So when I saw these two men on stage together, RFK Jr. and Trump, who, look, they've known each other a long time. I think they've sued each other and all kinds of fun stuff over the years. RFK Jr. tells those stories pretty funny. He's like, I think I was suing Donald Trump, and he gave me a lift on his plane to go to the courtroom where I was suing him. But that's just kind of guy Trump is. He loves competition. But he knows when you're being authentic, like he is. You have a situation here that took place in this last election where the Democrats got to a point where this is a branding issue, but it's also a substance issue, where they lost Joe Rogan, they lost Elon Musk, they lost feminist icons like Camille Paglia and Naomi Wolf, they lost Tulsi Gabbard.
Yep.
And they lost the oldest male heir of the most famous Democrat family in the United States, and that would be RFK Jr. So for all this talk here about, what happened, Democrats are doing the autopsy on themselves now. Well, and they talk about how they need their own Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
well,
it's a joke. They had their own Joe Rogan. He was called Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan and Tulsi Gabbard endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016. They did.
So the question is, what did you do? How did you lose this large swath of people? And look, I'm in the mix with all of this. A lot of the members of the Trump White House are my clients: Pete Hegseth, Scott Bessent, Tulsi, RFK. And look, there's a story behind all of them, and we don't have enough time. But I like to think of myself as a talent scout. Not just the names you know, but the names you don't know yet, right? I'm trying to be like a scouting director for the New York Yankees. I got this kid from Kalamazoo, Michigan. He's a mixed race descent. The shortstop doesn't hit for a lot of power, but he's a natural born leader. Oh, really? What's his name? Oh, his name's Derek Jeter. That's his name. Okay. So you got to try to find the Derek Jeters out there. You got to try to find the Kobe Bryants out there, right? That's what you're looking for in my world. And then I got this boneheaded idea, Nikki, to write my own books. I basically said to myself, you know what? I'm going to put myself through the same pain, because I'm Irish and I'm a masochist, obviously, that I put all my clients through, right? So in 2022, I put out The Woking Dead. And in 2024, I put out the
That's a good name for a book, man. That's a really good name for a book. The Woking Dead.
Let's get a copy here. Here we go. Let's get a copy. All right, here we go. So the audience can see. Here it is. Look, you got the hand. Look, that's Nancy Pelosi's hand coming up there. Ladies and gentlemen, no, it's not. It's a zombie hand. So look, I'm a pop culture guy.
Hold on. Nancy Pelosi is a zombie.
I'm a pop culture guy. Look, there's a lot of zombie references in this, not just The Walking Dead or George Romero's movies, but even Michael Jackson's Thriller. In fact, the book begins with Vincent Price's monologue from Thriller, which brings us to this book with an apology to the Beatles. Although the cover of this book took inspiration more from Pink Floyd's The Law, right? And obviously, we don't give a crap what Yoko Ono thinks, to hell with her, but we'll apologize to the four gentlemen from Liverpool. But I try to blend pop culture and entertainment, which was my life before politics, into politics. because I grew up with Howard Stern. I grew up with Rush Limbaugh. Andrew Breitbart was a mentor of mine. We used to put, when he was just running the Drudge Report, he used to say, look, the American people, they swim downstream from culture more than they swim downstream from politics. And look, Limbaugh used to say, his job was to use irreverent humor to illustrate truth, use comedy to illustrate truth, right? So that's what I try to do. And look, some people, if they're politically correct, their heads explode with some of my books and some of the chapter titles and so on. But look, you got to have a little fun.
Your latest book is called The White Privilege Album. And it's available, I'm assuming, everywhere, like Amazon, etc. So we're going to make sure we put all that into the show notes. But let's unpack a bit of what you said, okay? So you're a literature graduate. You studied English literature. I don't know if you can see my background, but this is my office. And there are 2,000 books here. There's another 3,000 in the rest of my house. I've read well over 4,000 books. I'm a poet. I write poetry. I know that you've told me that you're into poetry as well. I'm going to read you one of my poems in a moment. But before I do that, what was your favorite book when you were studying at Penn State? What book touched your soul and why?
Well, like a lot of people, I don't like to be told what to read. I don't like to be told how to think. So, I'm always trying to counter program, not just every moment, including probably this interview. But also, look, there are people that go to school, they go to college, and they're there to get the A, keep their GPA up, and move on.
What's your favorite book, buddy? What's your favorite book? That's the question. Come on.
Well, I don't know whether I can drill down on that. I will tell you the book that changed me, that got me into reading long before Penn State, when I'm like 10, was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the Hobbit. Both of those. Those
are great books.
Both of those. Okay, so if you're looking for the first ember, right? Those I think are probably, without like little kid stuff, like the Dr. Seuss. I'm talking about long form narrative storytelling.
Correct. Yeah.
Those two got me into the world that then became Henry James and Joseph Conrad and Faulkner and Fitzgerald and Ezra Pound and so on and so on, Dostoevsky and so on, right? But you can't just drop into the turn of the screw, okay? Unless you're Hunter Biden, then you can do the turn of the screw. But I will tell you, but you can't just drop in there, right?
What's your favorite book of all time that you've read, like a novel, not like a nonfiction book?
Probably Huckleberry Finn.
That is a phenomenal book. I'd like to know why.
From it, and the old way of writing was not to put the language of the narrative into the common man's voice, right? So it was always high English, right? Yeah. The Queen, even American stuff before Twain, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Emily Dickinson. You go to, even Edgar Allan Poe wrote, he's writing in the 1830s, and I love him to death. Don't get me wrong.
Amazing.
Into the Maelstrom is if you ask me about short stories, that would be a top 3. But pre-Twain, you have almost stuff that sounds, like theatrical presentation.
Yes.
Which comes out of the English tradition. But you got this group of guys around 1849 with the gold rush. And it's not just Twain, it's Hart Crane and Stephen Crane. I mean, it's the Red Badge of Courage. You go to a whole list, right? These guys start writing the way people in the saloons are talking.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So obviously there was a James Fenimore Cooper, right? The Last of the Mohicans, right?
Great book.
Right. And it's funny, him and Twain hate each other. That's a whole other story. But Twain's arch nemesis was Henry James. And what's funny is they had the same editors, same editor, HR Brands or something like HW Brands or something like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but James was horrified that he was polluting the English language, writing from a perspective of all these little people that we should never hear from, and because he was well born and well bred, and he was pedigreed, and he was he's right, Washington Square.
He's a snob.
Yeah,
He's
right.
a snob.
Right. So, but Twain creates this branch, and from that branch, you get Faulkner writing about the South.
Yep.
You get Steinbeck writing about the Duff Bowl.
Yep.
You get all of Hemingway's stuff. And if you take it a step further, you get to slightly different mediums. Graphic comic book. Stan Lee will tell you, like when he's alive, that he would write the way people talk in his comic books.
He did.
So whether it's the X-Men or the Fantastic Four, you study a guy like Elmore Leonard.
I love Elmore Leonard.
Who's considered a pulp writer. No Twain, no Leonard. No Leonard, no Quentin Tarantino. So if you follow the bouncing ball, and look, I have dealt with this in my freaking world.
You're brilliant,
okay?
dude. You're
Because
freaking brilliant.
Look, most people, here's the thing. You get Judge Jeanine on the phone right now. You get Laura Ingraham on the phone right now. You can talk to Don Jr. You talk to any of the killers that I have represented, either as a producer or as their publicist. They will tell you, we hire AJ because he talks to me the way Joe Pesci would talk to me. Okay? The way Scorsese would write, Mean Streets, right? Or Taxi Driver, or Raging Bull, or Goodfellas, or The Departed, or whatever the hell it is. So the answer has to be Twain. Huckleberry Finn, fine. But it has to be Twain. It has to be, because Twain is a divergence in what art can be. Right? And look, plenty of these other guys that come off of the Twain branch, Hemingway, for example, was obsessed with this thing that he called the iceberg method. Okay? And he said he wanted to write the way Cezanne painted, the famous impressionist, right? Yeah. But Cezanne used iceberg too. There was the object that you see, and then you have the below the waterline. What the hell's below the waterline? The iceberg, the majority of it, right? Mm-hmm. So like you take a short story by Hemingway like The Snows of Kilimanjaro. I ask students all the time, because I used to, I did some like pinch hit teaching of when I was in grad school in English literature and political science. What is The Snows of Kilimanjaro about? And people think, they give all kinds of nutty answers, Africa, metaphor for this, but it's actually about pregnancy and rebirth. The Snows of Kilimanjaro is a pregnant woman's stomach. But Hemingway has gone on the record and told us that. A lot of people don't read literary theory or literary criticism, and you could say to yourself, well, where was Hemingway when he wrote this? What state of mind was he in? Which wife was he on? Right?
Which wife was he on, dude?
Right?
That's right. Brutal.
Right? And you try to figure out how he got there. But just to answer your question, Huckleberry Finn, Life on the River, has to have primacy, and it does in my life, because when I got to DC, and this goes on everywhere. I don't care whether you're in New York City, DC, Toronto, Montreal, wherever the hell you are. There's the fancy kids, and then there's the Horatio Alger kids, the bootstrap kids, the kids that came from piss and vinegar, the kids that came from nothing, the kids that went to state schools. When I got the Laura Ingraham show and I became associate producer, we had this intern program. And all these kids in this intern program went to Georgetown and Yale and this one and that one and Stanford. And they would rarely show up. They wouldn't do what the hell they were supposed to. I pull Laura aside and I say, hey, we need some state school kids in here. Okay? We need some ass-kicking kids. Kids that appreciate the education they're getting. That they weren't prepped from kindergarten all the way through whatever the hell, year they're in now. Junior in college, law school, whatever the hell it is. And she was like, and she goes, all right, bring in three. So I bring in three killers, right? They went to one at University of Nebraska. One of them was at, I think, West Virginia University. And they brought in a kid from Penn State, which is where I went. They're like coal miners, grinders. What do you need now? What do you need next? They were early. They stayed late because they had a different mindset, a different work ethic, right?
Yeah.
That's how you can go from selling used books in your garage, like Jeff Bezos, to sending rockets into space with 5 feminists on board. It should stay there. I was thinking, Bezos, this is a great way to get rid of your fiance if you don't really like her that much. You could have a little oopsie. Anyway, but the reality is that I brought in those types of people, but here in town, there was a lot of people that, I didn't get. There was a lot of jobs I probably didn't get, a lot of shots I didn't get because I lacked the pedigree or the stupid freaking bow tie or whatever it was. I gave a speech once called to a group of young conservatives. There's video of it. It was called the "Burn Your Bow Tie" speech. You know, the 60s radicals, the feminists in the streets, they're all burning their bras, right? They're taking their bras off. They're not shaving their underarms, and they're burning these bras. Well, I told right-wingers right around 2007 or 8 to burn their bow ties. That conservatism does not have a uniform. Libertarianism, Americanism, there's no uniform. You don't have to dress like Alex P. Keaton. You don't. You can if you want. You'll notice Tucker Carlson took his bow tie off. He banned it. He was one of these people that had it on all the time on CNN for years, right? So there's no, look, you can ride a motorcycle, you can have a face tattoo, you can do all kinds of things. And that is kind of what RFK Jr. and Trump and Elon and a lot of disruptors have proven. Look, Bezos is disruptive. There's plenty of them. That there's no straight line. That you don't have a uniform either intellectually or physically. You can have an accent. You can not have an accent. You can speak like Twain or you can speak like Henry James. And that you should get a shot because you could be talented.
Hey, there you go. Donald Trump isn't exactly a well-bred man. He's a very wealthy man, but he talks like he's a New Yorker, a man from Queens. And he doesn't always speak in complete sentences and paragraphs. So there you go. So it's interesting what you said about your favorite book. And I thought that was a very, very brilliant analysis of American culture drawing a straight line from Mark Twain to today. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I'll tell you my own favorite novels. I have a couple. I can't narrow it down to one. Growing up, my favorite novel was The Eagle Has Landed by Jack Higgins. I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's a brilliant book. And the main hero of that book is a German officer in World War II who was sent to kill Winston Churchill.
Yep.
And he hated the Nazis, and he acted so bloody honorably. And I don't want to give away the plot line in case there's folks here who haven't read it and will have a chance to read and enjoy that book. But I have read that book at least 30 times. At least 30 times. That's how much I love that book. And that book, for me, was a straight line to all the novels that I've enjoyed since. So folks like Tom Clancy, The Hunt for Red October,
John le Carre,
The Cardinal of the Kremlin, all the other books, Vince Flynn.
I knew Vince.
Did you? He was a great man.
I knew Vince before he died. He was really good friends with Ingram, and he died of like strange out of the blue cancer. You got him. Yeah, Laura was there. Laura visited him in the hospital, I believe. So
he was a great man. Vince Flynn, and now
Ted Bell, right? Jack Carr. I'm assuming.
Jack Carr.
Right?
I love Jack Carr. I've read a bunch of his books. But the other person whose novels really impacted me and really is responsible for me becoming a conservative is Ayn Rand. I read The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Sure. I read Atlas Shrugged when I was 20 years old, and I read it over a course of a week. I had a paper due for university in political science, international politics. and I was reading Atlas Shrugged. That week I slept a total of 1 hour the whole week. I was either writing my paper or reading Atlas Shrugged the entire week. I read that book, that 1,100-page tome then, and that set me off on a quest to seek out conservative authors and writers. And that led me to William F. Buckley and National Review. And, I read a whole bunch of Ayn Rand's other books. I started to read William F. Buckley's novels, the Blackford Oaks books. I don't know, have you read the Blackford Oaks books? They're fantastic.
No, I mean, I've read Christopher Buckley's Thank You for Smoking.
That's a great book. That's a great book.
I've read that.
But you ought to read Buckley.
God and Man at Yale.
His novels are fun. His novels are a lot of fun.
I've never read any of his novels.
Check.
Quite frankly, lately, I don't read as much novels as I probably should. I mean, I feel like I read them all for like 20 years of my life. And in the last 10 years, maybe a couple a year, not as many as I used to.
Fiction's good for your soul. Fiction's good for you.
I think you're probably right.
It's good for your soul.
Right.
It's good to read.
I do ingest a lot of documentaries now. And I have done some audio versions of actually stuff, again, older, like you discover a writer and you go crazy through them, stuff, but not modern stuff, not guys that are alive. Like go through like Rudyard Kipling stuff or Graham
awesome.
Greene, right?
Graham Greene, sure. Dude, you're John Dos Passos, folks like that. I mean, that's amazing stuff.
Yeah, the power and the glory. I mean, it's funny, I saw Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino one time talking about, because they made From Dusk Till Dawn together, and then, you have the Mariachi trilogy, which is with Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek, and then, they made those Death Proof movies together, which are like pulp serialized Machete, and
Yeah, no, they're great. They're great.
If you read, it's funny because I heard Elmore Leonard say this once too. If you pick up The Power and the Glory, which is about this character, and this character's name is just the Whiskey Priest. He's basically this Catholic priest in Mexico and down the Southwest. It's like, like Desperado. He's like a wild man. He's like defending this town and killing people. It's like crazy, right? And it's funny because Graham Greene's considered, high literature, but he was himself, and he might have been getting influenced by Hemingway and other people at the time because they were contemporaries. But like some of his stuff, like Our Man in Havana, there's a movie Alec Guinness plays in.
Yeah, that's a great movie. I love that movie.
Yeah, he's someone too, like Hemingway and then Leonard later, that's they're channeling Twain because he's writing about British people, like there's a movie Brendan Fraser, he's in Vietnam. What the hell? Michael Caine and Brendan Fraser, and they're in Vietnam before the French leave, and there's still a French colony. So he always has some slick English person there. But for the most part, other than the one slick English person, he's writing in the language of the people too, right? And if you look at I'm Irish Catholic, so I love Irish literature. I mean, look at James Joyce. He said it. He said, I want to be the Irish Twain. So whether you read the Dubliners or Finnegan's Wake or Ulysses or any of these things, he's writing in the scumbaggery language of the whores and the drunks and the bartenders of Dublin, right? So, I mean, look, Twain he ripples down through the timeline in a lot of these people, right? A lot of these authors.
Yeah, he's great. He's great. So, your books, The Woking Dead and the White Privilege album, how do folks get a hold of these books? They go to Amazon. Is that the best way? What do you want them to do?
Sure. Yeah, they've both been #1 Amazon bestsellers in political humor categories, among others, a bunch of different categories. They're both on Amazon. They're on Barnes & Noble. They're on Books A Million. You can get them from Simon & Schuster's website. You can get them from Post Hill Press website, which is my imprint under Simon & Schuster. Pretty much, Target and Walmart have them. And we have, with The Woking Dead, we have a paperback. We have actually 2 different hardbacks and a paperback and an audiobook. And you can get it on like a reader, an e-reader. We just dropped the audiobook of the White Privilege album in January. So there's no paperback yet, but there will be later this year. And look, it took me 4 years to write The Woking Dead. It took me 2 years to write the White Privilege album. And it's funny, I've studied all these different writers we've talked about and their methodologies. Some of them do get stuck, and they won't write. I mean, Fitzgerald got stuck for years. Some people think his wife was the reason he couldn't finish things. Zelda Fitzgerald, the great partier. But other authors, like some of the ones you mentioned, like Vince Flynn, when I met these guys, I had a chance. Ted Bell we've worked on his books. I've been able to pick their brain. And the one thing that I can say, and this also goes for filmmakers, whether it's Wes Anderson or the Coen brothers or Woody Allen or Hitchcock, doesn't matter who it is, they all created a formula. So, first book took 4 years, second book took 2 years, the third book is done. It's being edited right now. It'll be out next year. That took me about 11 months. So, I've created a formula. I look at it, I go about this in a multidimensional marketing way. If you go through all my books, you'll see Easter eggs and stuff that I've hidden. My publisher doesn't even know they're there. What wasn't it the White Album? If you played it backwards, it said something. No, I'm joking. But look, with my first book, I got a bunch of my famous friends to give me blurbs for it. Laura Ingraham, our current Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, gave me a blurb for this. He wasn't Secretary of Defense then. But with this book, I got blurbs from way more famous people. My blurbs for this book came from Abraham Lincoln, Joseph Stalin, Benjamin Franklin, Santa Claus, Christopher Columbus, and many others. So if you're looking for a funny book endorsed by both Joseph Stalin and Santa Claus, pick up your copy of the White Privilege album, and you won't be disappointed.
We'll make sure we put all that in the show notes so people can grab their copy. We end off every episode, brother, by asking you, our guest expert, for your top 3 expert action steps. These are in bullet point form, your best pieces of advice to help my listener take their life, their business to the next level. What say you?
Well, number one, I mentioned it earlier. None of this is supposed to be a straight line, right? Any type of creativity involves some destruction. It does. So it's a 2-step forward, forward to 1 step back situation. And especially people, millennials and Gen Z that are out there listening in particular, you're going to have to play a little 3-card Monte with your life. You're going to have to figure out what your priorities are. Is it career? Is it family? Is it spirituality? Is it just cold hard cash? Whatever it is. You're not going to get them all. And you're not going to get them all at the same time. You need to understand that. One thing that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is there are a lot of people in my world that are no longer here. They're still alive, but they're no longer here. And they're no longer here because they didn't build the mountain from the ground up. They thought they could take a helicopter to the top of the mountain and then just ski down it at will. Sometimes when you do that, you don't know the mountain. You haven't climbed it from the ground up. You don't know where every rock is, where every avalanche could happen. You don't know. So build your own mountain from the ground up. Don't try to take a shortcut. I have a friend who's got a helicopter. It's Kobe's pilot. You can't do that. You've got to go from the ground up. Absolutely. And then you can ski down it at will and climb back up and ski down it at will. Right? And the third thing I would say is that whether it's your country or whether it's your own life story, no one else can write it for you. The Canadian government, the American government, the Australian government, wherever you're at, these elected officials serve at the pleasure of you. The states created the federal government here in the United States. It wasn't the other way around. We tell you. You don't tell us. And look, every form of government has checks and balances. But just understand that, you as an individual writing your own story, and you can write like Twain or you can write like James, it doesn't matter. You want to speak the King's English? That's fine. You want to speak Tarantino English? That's fine. Because there is no uniform for your own personal authenticity, right? And if you stay, look, the American people, and I'm assuming most Canadians too, they believe in two things. One is merit, that there's a meritocracy, and I think the anti-woke movement, the anti sort of affirmative action movement, the DEI movement in Western civilization is partly part of this. I know the UK just had an election with my buddy Nigel Farage, and his UK Reform Party is now moving in the direction of being the primary opposition to the left-wing kooks running London. But also this, you have to understand that, when you're writing your own story, you have to think back and you have to say to yourself, am I being authentic? So merit is one thing, authenticity is another. And that is why Kamala Harris was not elected president of the United States, and it's why Bill Clinton was. And like you said earlier, Trump's a hard hat guy from Queens. He I-beams. Trump and Obama both have parents that were born in another country. Obama's was in Kenya. Trump's was in Scotland, his mother. So, look, there's no list of absolute genetic qualifications or upbringings to be successful. You have to believe in these things I'm talking about, and like Nikki talks about every week when he does this show.
I really like that quote that you gave us. Say it again about there's no uniform to your authenticity. How did you say it exactly?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't. There is no uniform to your authenticity. There isn't. There's no, like I said to you earlier when I was coming up, no uniform to conservatism, no uniform to libertarianism, no uniform to being a successful entrepreneur or a thinker. In fact, the people that burn their uniforms, the people that shatter the mold, are the people that become revolutionaries, right? Whether it's Elon Musk, Benjamin Franklin, Mark Twain, Abraham Lincoln, whoever it is.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. AJ Rice, man, it's an honor to have you here on the show. We'll make sure that all your details are placed in the show notes. Listener, AJ Rice is the real deal. There is no uniform to your authenticity. Remember that. Go to Amazon to pick up a copy of his books, The Woking Dead and the White Privilege album. Don't just pick up a copy for yourself. Buy 5 to 10 copies and hand them out as gifts to all the people you love and all your best clients. And make sure that if you got something great from this episode, you share it with others, and that you leave us a like, you leave us a rating, you leave us a review. Brother, thanks for coming on the show, man. An honor to have you here. God bless you.
God bless you. Look, it's an honor. You're a patriot. You're a great Canadian. You're a great member of Western civilization. And I know you do nothing but want to help people. And I hope everyone watching today had a smile on their face most of the time and hopefully learned something as well. So it was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you bet, man. You bet. And that wraps up another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. To find out more about today's amazing guest, the one and only AJ Rice, go to the show notes at thethoughtleaderrevolution.com or wherever you happen to listen to this episode, be it iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, Rumble, or what have you. Until next time, goodbye.
This episode has been brought to you by eCircleAcademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.